Lawn here, back with another video, and today I'm gonna be giving you guys a story time. So actually, the lawnmower that I just bought that I've been posting on my YouTube channel, it broke down about a week ago. I'm gonna play you guys a clip. So yes, they had to use a forklift to get the zero turn off of my truck. And unfortunately now, I have to go back to using the freaking lawnmower. But it's good. It's good. I'm straight, you know? Like, I'm gonna bounce back in the fall and just take over. But to give you guys a backstory on what happened to the lawnmower, one day I was using it. I did about 4 yards and then I went to take a break. Came back, tried to start it on this other customer's property. I think I weeded it. And once I tried to start the zero turn, it just wouldn't even make a noise, not even a sound. Usually it'll try to turn on.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
But it didn't even make no, it was just nothing. So a few days later, I took it to the shop and they told me it'll take 2 weeks for it to get out. So now that's what I'm waiting for. And if you haven't already, comment, like, and subscribe. Enough of me talking. Let's get to the podcast.
I was saying that marijuana can be your friend and it can enhance your life. But if you take too much, it's such a seductive little creature. Because a little bit of it is like, this is nice, this feels good. But if you get too crazy, especially if you get too crazy with edibles, it'll take you away on this wild journey of paranoia and it'll lock you up. Like, some people just need to take a couple weeks off. Just relax.
That's always a good idea.
It is a good idea, right?
Yeah. I think people underestimate cannabis. I think it can be, like you say, it can really sort of knock you off your center, especially if it's edible. And like all these things, you got to learn how to use it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically, that's what you got to do. You have to learn how to use it. But you know, that's my rap. So.
Yeah, it is your rap, but it's a great rap. It really is. It's so important. I think it's so important for people to realize that you gotta let, like, regular you, like natural, sober you. It's important to be in touch with that. Like, you don't want to always be high or always be caffeinated or always be anything.
No, exactly. I mean, people get, to these places and they fail to do a reality check on themselves. I mean, I get emails from people all the time that said, well, life's been pretty weird lately. I took mushrooms 5 times last week and, and it's like, dude, how about you lay off for a while and give yourself a chance? Because, they tell these stories and it's like the idea of, okay, let's find your center, go back to baseline, lay off the sauce, whatever it is you're taking, and just chill out and try and rediscover your center. It seems like common sense advice, but people don't do it.
It does seem like common sense advice, but common sense is not common. I mean, I think everybody knows that.
Well, yes, all you have to do is look around to realize that.
What is it about people, though, that once they indulge in any sort of, it doesn't even have to be a substance. It could be an activity, like gambling, for instance. Like, once it gets in your bones, it just seems like you're so compelled to just continue that behavior, and the idea of stopping is almost more painful than the idea of wrecking your life.
This is addiction.
Yeah.
This is basically, these things are reinforcing. They activate those pleasure circuits, in the brain, mediated mainly through dopamine, and all of these, I mean, the so-called drugs of abuse, which I think is a terrible word, but, the reinforcing drugs, the pleasure drugs, work directly or indirectly through the dopamine circuits, and the dopamine is like your button for pleasure, in the same way that serotonin is kind of on the opposite side. It's your button for more like euphoria, feeling good, but not the it doesn't have the punch, I guess, which is why people can get addicted to gambling, they can get addicted to sex, they can get addicted to television, all of these things. It doesn't have to be substances, because they all hit those same circuits, except the psychedelics, which don't work on that reward circuitry. They work on a different set of circuits.
But yet, even with those, your behavior patterns can become addictive. And then you can start just doing psychedelics too much. And it's not even the psychedelics that are doing it. It's just this compulsive need to constantly change your state of mind.
Yeah, that's quite true. And if people, the way to use psychedelics is there are many ways to use it, but basically use it thoughtfully. You can... all the question about recreational use versus spiritual use versus therapeutic use, these are all ways to approach it. And I am not a person who says you must do it this way, you must do it that way. What I do say is do it from an informed place and approach it thoughtfully, because, in other words, don't, plan for it. Respect the medicine in a certain way, use it in a circumstance where you can learn from the medicine rather than have the medicine be sort of a overlay over whatever else you're doing. This is something that demands attention, and I think that's the best way to use psychedelics. And for whatever spin you put on it, is it spiritual, is it therapeutic, is it recreational, is it shamanic? These are all labels. The important thing is that you approach the medicine itself. The medicine is the teacher, right? Not the sitter, not the shaman, not the psychotherapist. If they're doing their job correctly, in my opinion, their job is to let you have your encounter with the medicine. And the medicine is what you learn from. They're there to facilitate that. They can intervene if you get anxious or if things go on, make sure, nobody comes to the door, that kind of thing. But basically it's to facilitate a learning opportunity where you and your teacher, which is the medicine, be it ayahuasca or mushrooms or whatever, can have this intense one-on-one interaction,
I feel like with psychedelics as well as with all these other things that we're talking about, any kind of drug, even coffee, alcohol, whatever, and behavior patterns, all these different things. I think one of the things that happens with human beings is you get so far along in your life and these behavior patterns become so like tight grooves that are carved into your psyche. And then as you become an adult, then you start to learn like, oh, there's got to be a better way to handle this. Let me figure out how to do this. And it's almost like getting a car when you're really young and not learning how to drive until you're like in your 20s.
Right.
And so you're just driving this thing. It's smashing into trees and grinding the gears. And then somewhere along the line, you're like, oh my God, I'm fucking myself up. I have to figure out a way to do this correctly. And there's two different approaches. There's one, the abstinence approach, which is very popular. People say, well, I'm straight edge now. I don't do anything and that's it. And I just do wheatgrass and I run hills and stuff. I'm like, okay, you could do that too.
Right, you can do it.
You definitely can do that too. But I just don't think that there's anything wrong with any of these things. I think there's something wrong with the way we use them. And I think it's one of the inherent problems with things being illegal, is that we can't discuss this. We don't have people like you or centers where people can go, where people can become educated on the proper way to use these drugs, medicines, whatever you want to call them, these compounds, and get something out of them that can really be beneficial.
Right, that's exactly right. I've said this many, many times that, drug education, what they call drug education in this country, is a joke because the whole emphasis is on don't use them. That's absurd. That's like telling, an 18-year-old guy full of testosterone, don't have sex.
Right.
Come on, it's built into the genetics. They're going to go for that. What they have to do, what they can't bring themselves to acknowledge in the drug education field is it's not about telling people not to use drugs. It's about teaching people how to use drugs if they choose to, right? Like any other skill, people have to learn to drive. They have to learn to do yoga. They have to learn to do whatever they do. there's an educational process. I tell people many times, my shtick is there is no such thing as a bad drug. And that's another problem with the dialogue. The badness is projected onto the drugs. Drugs are simply compounds with a certain pharmacology. There's no moral aspect to them. The moral dimension comes in how do people use them. That's where, it's human behavior that's moral or immoral. I say, there's no such thing as a bad drug. Plenty of bad ways to use drugs, but that comes from the person, not the compound.
Yeah. And I've always admired that you figured out when we were really young. I mean, when I met you, you quit. And, we were both in our early 20s.
Yeah.
And you were like, fuck this.
Right.
I'm not going down that road. And you didn't need anything. You didn't need Alcoholics Anonymous. You're like, no, I'm not doing it.
I did some therapy. That helped. I just needed to realize that once I realized that, and I had gone to Al-Anon because of my dad, adult child of alcoholic meetings, which helped me a phenomenal amount, just to realize that that it's a disease and that, you're powerless to it. And that for me, I was able to apply what I learned in there, because I went to a couple AA meetings, and in Boston, it was like, guys would get up and they were like, and then I blew a guy for a sandwich and I passed out in the fucking dump. And they, it's like, I couldn't relate. I mean, my thing was like, I fucked a fat chick. That was my bottom. I had a three-way with a couple girls who were, as fat as John Panette. And so I could, but I read the literature of the 12 steps, and it helped me because it made me realize that when I wanted to drink, something was going on.
Yeah.
And to this day, I just have that reaction. I know that I still want to drink all the time, but when I really want to drink, I stop and I go, all right, what's stressing you out? What do you need to deal with? And then I just kind of focus on it.
Yeah. Yeah, there was, when I was a kid, my dad was an architect, and so I worked on a lot of construction sites, and I met a lot of junkies. A lot of people on construction sites are either alcoholics or drug addicts. And there was this one guy that I really liked. He was a funny guy, man. Really funny guy, and he's in the band. His name is Robbie. Funny fucking dude. Loved hanging around with him, but just couldn't stay off the coke.
Wow.
Couldn't stay off the coke. And you could totally tell. He'd be honest about it too. Say how he went off the rails, and we would be working together. He was a carpenter, and I was like a laborer, so I was like an apprentice. And so he'd be talking to me while he's explaining to me how to do things and stuff like that. And he's like, yeah, I'm just fucking tired of this. I'm getting my shit together. The band's getting back together again. We're writing songs and this and that. And then he'd come in Monday looking like shit. Just looking like shit, real grumpy, didn't want to talk, had a headache.
Yeah.
And, and he didn't let it, went off the rails.
Right. The saddest thing is that when you first start doing drugs, and I don't know about you, but I had a phenomenal time doing cocaine. Mushrooms and all the stuff I did as a teenager was like, I never got hooked on it. And if you do it, maybe I did coke 50 times without ever getting hooked, it's a blast. That's the best kept secret. But then once you get hooked, you're not even having fun anymore. You're just maintaining. You're just feeding it so you don't crash. With heroin, you're just trying to avoid withdrawals. You're not even feeling that great anymore.
I think with Robbie too, part of the problem was he was very disappointed in himself.
Yeah.
It was booze too. He would just go off the rails and try to keep it together. It's like there's a lot of people out there that they have a dream, and then the pressure of trying to reach that dream, like his dream is to be in a successful band, right? And the pressure of trying to reach that dream and see it to fruition, it just seems unreachable.
Yeah.
It seems too far off. And here you are, you're in your 30s and you're working in a construction job, and you fucking work all day in Boston in the winter. You're tired as shit when you get home. You don't want to go to band practice.
Yeah.
You get home at 6:30, you have dinner, and now it's 7:30. You got to get up.
Right.
You got to get up in a few hours.
Right.
Like, what are you doing? When are you going to bed? You got to get up at 6. Like,
Then you go to
fuck.
band practice and the drummer doesn't show up, so
Right.
you can't practice. Or
He's 45 minutes late, his car breaks down, and you're fucking pissed, and your girlfriend's screaming at you.
Yeah, Yeah, then try to have a relationship on top of that. Tell that girl you can't go out on Saturday night ever because you're doing gigs.
And then the gigs suck, and you're not making any money, and they're like, you should get a job. The gigs suck. You should get a job.
Yeah.
Fuck.
And then you're in a band, so girls are throwing themselves at you. You have an affair. She's got some coke.
Now it's good. Now the story turned around.
I turned it around.
Now it's exciting again.
Born to be wild.
Down, down, down.
Sometimes when I work at casino, there'll always be that band in the lounge that's playing like Born to Be Wild and all those songs. And like, you'll see people that are like 57 dancing and you see them and they're dancing and it's like, they're just reliving the only joy they had in their life, which was like when they were young, dancing a rock. And this band is fucking, they're gods to them.
Mm. Yeah, the time when you're young, when you're having fun, is so fleeting.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden responsibilities stack up. And all of a sudden, you know, you have to pay bills. You have obligations. You have so much that you have to think about.
Yeah.
For so many people, there's this period of their life where they look back to whimsically. Like, that was the time when I was free.
Yeah.
I was young and my dick got hard all the time.
I could go 2 or 3 times.
3 times in a night. Like,
shit.
Wild, man. I can't believe it.
And you think anything is possible. I
Yeah.
mean, that's really,
anything can happen.
that's the loss of innocence, is when you realize at a certain point that you do have to pick a path and stay on it.
Oh, yeah. You better.
Because you got to pay the bills with it. And, you know, and then what's so sad is you see people that work so fucking hard for not a lot of money. And, you know, bills just add up. And then they save just enough when they get their vacation twice a year. They'll go to, like, a cruise, and they'll just drink nonstop for a week. And at the end of it, they're just hungover. They blew the excess money they had. And that was it? That's what you worked all year for?
I had a friend of mine who worked in a restaurant, and one of the guys who worked with saved up his money for 8 years. Went to Vegas and blew it in one day.
God.
It was the most heartbreaking story. This poor guy, I think he was a dishwasher, and he worked there for 8 years.